Well, hello. Welcome back to Public Affairs, Public Access. My name is Ray Hill. I am the interim, sometimes host of this program. And this program is a continuation of a program that began some 3 weeks ago. Guest is Doug Caddy. Doug Caddy is a lawyer. He's a writer. He's admitted to the bar in both Texas and the District of Columbia. He has a very interesting history around Watergate in him. He is the author of 6 books. 3 of them were published by the Texas A&M University Press. As a matter of fact, Gerald Ford, who replaced Richard Nixon on that fateful day having to do with Watergate, was reading Doug Caddy's first book while that was taking place. That book's title is The $100 Million Payoff. Doug's biography appears in Who's Who in America, Who's Who in American Law, and Who's Who in the World. This is a part 2 of a 2-part series. You can find part 1 on HMS, Houston Media Sources, a YouTube page. So we've got a whole catalog of archived programs on YouTube, and you find them during the course of this show. Links to them will be appearing at the bottom of your screen. Keep your eye open. Hi, Doug. Welcome back.
Well, thank you much for inviting me, Ray. You know, it's an honor to be here and to have you as my interviewer, because some viewers may not be aware of your background. I just want to say that Ray Hill is one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met. I consider him a great man. I've worked with some important people in my life. I consider Ray Hill a great man. I'm just going to cite 2 examples of how of the impact you've had on American life. And one is the Texas Lawrence versus Texas. That's a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court and struck down the sodomy law in Texas as being unconstitutional and changed the course of history for gay people. And that case would never have come to the Supreme Court had not Ray Hill got a call in the early morning hours, just after the arrest of the 2 gay men who were arrested in their residence, in their own residence, in their bedroom, by these zealous law enforcement people. And Ray knew exactly what to do legally to shepherd this case to the Supreme Court. And it was Ray Hill who did this. And thank you so much, Ray, for
Well, thank you, Doug. That's a very flattering thing to say. I'm still struggling trying to remain relevant. Hill versus Houston and Lawrence v. Texas, of course, will be printed forever.
Yeah, it was the second case. There's a lot of talk in the media these days, a lot of about police abuse cases. And you had a case in 1987 that went all the way to the Supreme Court, a case right here in Houston involving police abuse in which you were involved. And it went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and you prevailed 8-1. There was one who
Rehnquist voted
Chief
against
Judge.
me. Yeah, but he couldn't find a clerk to write an intelligible brief on his position,
Right.
So he quoted a song. No, I had breakfast this morning. Or not breakfast, I had a meeting this morning about breakfast time with Chief McClellan in Houston. And Hill versus Houston comes up regularly in those meetings because what he wants to do is avoid a blow up that's going on right now in Baltimore and Cleveland. And the way to do that is to avoid city being in jeopardy of another Hill versus Houston.
Right. And weren't you in one of those decisions referred to as a citizen provocateur?
That Hill versus Houston, actually Judge Rubin at the Fifth Circuit coined the phrase, but Justice Brennan liked it so well he repeated it.
So it's an honor to be interviewed by you, Ray. You've done
Thank you, Doug,
extraordinary.
and I have an enormous amount of respect. You and I have been friends for years.
Many, many years.
Many years, and I've watched your political evolution with great wonder. We have every justification to be good friends because we have come a long way together.
We have done that. You referred to that this program is the second part, and the first part dealt with Watergate. It can be accessed on the YouTube already. But I'm going to just give a brief background because really my talk tonight will be about my dinner with Howard Hunt in 1975. He was just getting ready to go to prison. Judge Siric had sentenced him to prison. He was going to serve sentenced to 5.5 years. I think he served just over 3. And so I want to talk about tonight about that dinner because what he told me at that time I think is quite relevant in clearing up history in regarding both Watergate and the Kennedy assassination. But I met Howard Hunt after my employer, which was General Foods Corporation of White Plains, New York. Well, when I was graduated from New York University Law School, I went to work for General Foods Corporation, White Plains, New York, and they sent me after 2 years from their headquarters to Washington, D.C. to open up an office to lobby, be their Washington representative. But they asked that I serve for the first year out of the Robert Mullen Company, their public relations firm, just to get the feeling of Washington, D.C. and so forth. And so I started doing that, and soon after I arrived, this was 1969, Howard Hunt joined the staff of the Mullen Company. He had been placed there by Richard Helms, the director of the CIA, and Howard came directly from the CIA. And we started talking, and it turned out that the godfather of Howard Hunt's children was William F. Buckley, and Buckley and I were great friends. I'd written for National Review actually when I was a junior at Georgetown University, undergraduate, and then I had worked with Buckley in founding the conservative movement, founding Youth for Goldwater, and then founding Young Americans for Freedom and so forth. So we had a lot in common, and so we became close friends, and I got to know his family, Dorothy, and his children, and then I left General Foods Corporation, and I left General Foods Corporation about 1970 and 71, and went for a law firm, and one of my first clients was Howard Hunt. He had a number of personal issues, so to speak, on wills, and he wanted me to write letters to publishers. He had books he wanted published and so forth. And so we established an attorney-client relationship about 1971. And then Watergate came in June 17th, 1972. That's when the burglars were arrested just after midnight at the Watergate complex inside the Democratic National Committee. And I got a call from Howard Hunt. I was awakened from a sound sleep. He called me saying he was at his White House office and could he come to my residence immediately. There was something important he had to talk to me about. I said, sure. I lived about a mile from the White House in Washington, D.C., and about a mile from Watergate. And so he arrived about a half an hour later. He arrived about 3:35 a.m., just a few hours after the arrest, and he explained to me what had occurred. I was aghast. I realized the significance and the long-range significance of this. It occurred to me this meant problems for Richard Nixon, basically, after listening to what Howard Hunt told me had occurred at Watergate. But he retained me to...
Of course, what he told you then would have been protected by a lawyer-client relationship.
Yes, that's correct.
They could not subpoena you and get you to divulge because you already had a client-attorney relationship.
An ongoing relationship.
Yeah.
Not only that, but a partner of the law firm always sat in and my meetings with Howard Hunt whenever it came to the law firm. So he actually had a partner of the law firm and myself representing him. Though in this particular case it was Watergate, I represented him. And so he called Gordon Liddy from my apartment and explained that, and Gordon Liddy retained me in the case too, and they both retained me at that time to represent the 5 individuals. McCord, who was ex-CIA agent, and the 4 Cuban Americans. We realized there could be a conflict of interest by representing all 7 people, but at that point, because Hunt and Liddy had not been arrested, they had escaped.
They weren't party.
They weren't party, and there was time to straighten that out. The important thing was to get those arrested out on bail before this became a major case, so to speak, and that was our intent. And so I did represent the individuals, and June, towards the end of June, I was in the courthouse. I think it was like June 27th, and I was handed a subpoena by the prosecutor, one of the prosecutors, to appear forthwith before the grand jury. And I was grabbed by the arm. Forthwith means you appear immediately. And they grabbed by the arm, and I was pulled before the grand jury, and I became the first witness to appear before the federal grand jury. And on the advice of 5 attorneys representing me, subsequently I refused to answer 38 questions, and Judge Sirica, on July 12th, this is still within a month after the arrest, said he actually accused me of being a principal in the case, being a principal in the criminal case. Here I was the attorney, and he falsely accused me in open court of being a principal, and said if I did not answer the 38 questions, he would hold me in contempt of court and jail me. I refused the next day to answer the questions. My 5 attorneys told me to refuse to answer the 38 questions on the attorney-client privilege and on the right to Sixth Amendment, the right to counsel. Mm-hmm. And on July 18th, which is about a month after Watergate broke, the U.S. Court of Appeals upheld Judge Sirica's decision that I should appear before the grand jury and answer the questions. And so the position of my position and my attorneys was we had done enough work to show there had been abuse of me, falsely accusing me of being a principal in the criminal case, that if these people were convicted, it could be overturned on appeal. Okay, so we felt we had done our legal work in protecting our clients.
Now, excuse me, Doug, but in the actual practice of law, I mean, everyday kind of thing. First, the grand jury questions infringed upon your lawyer-client relationship.
Right.
Right of privacy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a constitutionally protected right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's very clear in the Constitution what does that. So it really doesn't make any difference what Judge Sirica or the appellate court do. That doesn't do anything about that being a violation to both you and your client.
Well,
I mean, you have to litigate that.
Yeah.
But that constitutional standard is still cherishly held by both lawyer and client in that kind of a situation.
Yes. I mean, it's sacred, basically. The attorney-client, sure. It's sacred, okay? But it was abused in this case. And on the next day, when I went back before the grand jury, there's discussion between Richard Nixon and John Ehrlichman. It's in the Oval Office tapes. And Nixon, they're discussing my being forced to go back before the grand jury. And Nixon says, "Don't tell me they're forcing a lawyer to testify before the grand jury." He was aghast that this was happening. And as an aside here, over the 4th of July weekend, which is about 2 weeks after Watergate case broke, I was approached by someone on the phone, I never actually knew who it was, to pass hush money to the defendants, and I turned it down. And after conferring with partners in my law firm, we didn't know who we were dealing with. But it turned out later it was Anthony Ulasewicz acting upon the instructions of John Dean that he wanted to pass hush money to the defendants.
So hush money is like what former Speaker of the House is going through right now. Pay the witness to keep your mouth shut.
To a certain extent, that's true, right? Uh-huh.
Dennis Hazard.
Dennis Hazard. Uh-huh. And but John Dean, who was orchestrating the cover-up in the White House, never told Nixon he never told Nixon that my law firm, 2 months before Watergate broke, had assigned me to work in the Lawyers Committee for the re-election of the president. And the chairman of that committee, this is in April, said report to John Dean's office. And so I was working, following instructions from John Dean, just doing ordinary campaign work for 2 months before Watergate under instructions of John Dean. But John Dean never told Nixon this. John Dean purposely kept from Nixon a great deal of information about what was going on because John Dean, it appears, was deeply involved in the planning, the planning that ultimately led to the burglary. Okay, there was discussions in the Attorney General's office, and so forth. So John Dean had his own agenda to protect, basically. But going forward, I was a witness at the first Watergate trial. At that time, it was announced that Howard Hunt was pleading guilty, and the 4 Cuban Americans were pleading guilty. They followed Howard Hunt's decision. The reason Howard Hunt did that was in the month in December, just before. This was in January that he pleaded guilty, January 73. His wife had been killed in that mysterious plane crash in Chicago, and Howard Hunt was a broken man at that point. I mean, he had 4 children he had to worry about. He was facing going to prison. His wife had just been killed. It was a terrible experience for him. And so he decided to plead guilty. His lawyer advised him to plead guilty, okay? And so there was a trial. McCord and Liddy stood trial, and I testified. I testified reluctantly for the prosecution, involuntarily, under order of the court. And then I testified for the defense, for McCord and for Liddy. And then, of course, 3 months later, McCord wrote his letter to the judge exposing the hush money, the cover-up, and so forth, and the case entered a new phase, you might say. So this is sort of the background. I've explained this in the first part of this program, but why in 1975 I got a call from Howard Hunt to join him for dinner, because we had not had any contact really from the beginning of Watergate. Actually, my contact with Howard Hunt after Watergate broke was very limited. He came to my apartment the early morning hours of the break-in, and then I went to the funeral of his wife, Dorothy, in December of 1972. And then because of legal reasons, so to speak, because who knows based on what I've been forced to do to testify before the grand jury, it was wise that we have no contact, that we have no discussion. I didn't want to compromise him in any way at all. But he had been convicted, he had pleaded guilty, and he testified before the Watergate committee.
And he did all that without your consultation?
Yes. Yes, without my consultation. He had his own lawyers at that point. The hush money that I turned down actually was accepted by the attorney that followed me, who was a partner of a major law firm, who was later named an unindicted co-conspirator. I was never charged in any way as a. I was never
except
indicted.
for threatened for contempt. You were home free.
Yeah, contempt, in which really a badge of honor. I protected my clients.
Sure.
My attorney says, this is a badge of honor. You've gone to prison. You've gone to jail briefly to protect your clients, the rights of your clients. And so I was never disciplined by the bar or anything like that. So Howard Hunt, he was going to prison. This is 1975 again, and he felt like, well, now was a time to sit down with Doug. He said, it's time for us just to. I'm going away for a while, and I want to express my appreciation for you, and so let's have dinner. And so we picked the Yen Chin Palace restaurant in Washington, and which was a very prominent and famous restaurant. It's a Chinese restaurant up on Connecticut Avenue. It's where the Cuban Missile Crisis was settled over dinner. It closed a few years ago, and the Washington Post had an article, 50 Years of Secrets to Go. That was the title of the article about the closing of the Yen Chin Palace, because there have been so many secret deals. Kissinger used to eat there regularly and so forth. And so we met there, we had our dinner, and Hunt wanted to keep it light. He didn't want to he did not want to discuss anything.
Well, he's looking at going to prison.
Yeah.
I mean, a little levity would help him.
Yeah. But I had things I wanted to ask him, things I was never able to ask him. The first night, we were only together in my apartment, in my residence there, for an hour and a half before he left to go home. And so there were things that, that happened afterwards. So I had questions to ask him. So I started off saying, Howard, why did you go? What is the real reason you went in there, into Watergate? And that's always been a mystery. And to a certain extent, has been a mystery up to now.
It remains a mystery in the popular literature. Right. How do you justify the burglary? Right. It's got to be more than just placing a few bugs and other things, because everybody knew what everybody was doing. Right. The burglary is a little more serious. Yeah. Somebody had to be looking for something. Something.
That's exactly right. Well, he said, well, we went in there, I told them to just photograph anything that had numbers on it. I said, Howard, come on now. You can't get away with that. I mean, after what I went through on your behalf and representing you and the others. You can't just say that. After all, let's remember that you did plead guilty to the charges were burglary and eavesdropping and conspiracy. And when I testified at the trial on behalf of McCord and Liddy, in front of me was a table that was full of all this equipment and so forth. And I said it was obviously you went in there, photographic equipment as well as eavesdropping equipment. You went in there for other reasons. So you went in there for, and I said, did you not go in there to replace a wiretap bug that was defective? And he didn't answer. He just nodded affirmatively. Okay, he didn't articulate verbally. Okay, I said, well,
because you might have been bugged. From his perspective, you might have been bugged.
Well, yeah. Actually, there was a booth in the Yinqing Palace that notoriously was bugged. It was at the back. And it was used by the law enforcement. They wanted to record things, okay? Fortunately, we were not in that booth. But so he just nodded affirmatively. And I said, well, Howard, it's also been in the press and so forth, though it never really became an issue at the trial, that a prostitution ring was being run out of the Democratic National Committee, and one of the reasons for going in there was to photograph the books of the names of the clients and what they wanted and so forth, And I said, was that a reason? And he nodded affirmatively again. Okay. And I said, well, those two reasons, to my opinion, in my opinion, does not justify going into Watergate. That does not justify a burglary of this, which had immense implications. And so there's got to be something else. And I pressed him. I said, there's got to be something else. And he said, well, and there was something else, okay? And I said, well, what is that? And he said, well, we were after a Cuban intelligence report. A Cuban government intelligence report. And I said, I was puzzled by that. I never heard anything like that. I never read anything about that. And I said, why were you interested in this? And he said, because the Cuban intelligence report, we believed, had information about how John Kennedy had been killed, the details of the assassination of Kennedy. And I said, wow, I mean, this is really, this is interesting. And I said, well, tell me more. And at that point, he just put his hands up and said, that was it, that was it. So
there's not going to be any more.
No more, not anymore. Okay.
Okay, now let me set the stage.
Yeah.
What year is this?
This is 1975.
Okay, 1900, you're having this conversation. What year was the election?
1972.
1972. Mm-hmm. The Democratic candidate for president was?
George McGovern.
George McGovern.
Mm-hmm.
Even an old hardcore Democrat like myself didn't give George McGovern much of a chance of being elected president.
Right.
But they thought that maybe in the Watergate office there was some incriminating information about the Kennedy assassination that could be used as a last-minute secret weapon in that election?
Yes, that would actually tie Nixon indirectly through a chain of events to the Kennedy assassination, which historically is true. Yeah,
Kennedy was in Dallas Nixon was in Dallas when Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas.
But so we had our dinner, and then we kept it sort of light after that, you might say, and we discussed, about his children and my circumstances and so forth. And so we walked out. And on the street, I decided, well, there's one more. I'm gonna, before Howard leaves, who knows when I'll see him? I got to ask a couple more questions. I pressed forward, and I said, Howard, why was Kennedy assassinated? Why was this information so important? And he said, Kennedy was to give our most vital secret, was about to give our most vital secret to the Soviets. And I was startled by that. Kennedy was going to give our most vital secret to the Soviets. I said,
our most vital secret.
And I said, what was that? And he looked me straight in the eyes and he said, the alien presence. And with that, he shook my hand and walked away. Well, this was 1975, okay? I mean, I knew where I was when Kennedy was assassinated.
Sure.
I was I was in law school. I was working in Governor Rockefeller's office in the daytime, working for the lieutenant governor who was a conservative. It was Rockefeller's private office at 22 West 55th Street. There were only about 30 people in the whole townhouse there, townhouse operation. And I got a call from a friend of mine who was working on Wall Street, from a law school, my friend, and he said, Doug, Kennedy's just been assassinated, and I got to go. And so I went to Lieutenant Governor, which was like 30 feet away, and I said, Lieutenant Governor Wilson, I just received word that Kennedy's been assassinated. He said, go downstairs to the press office. So I rode down from the 5th floor to the 1st floor, and there was a press office, a very small one that Rockefeller had there. And I went inside, and I said to the receptionist, Kennedy's been assassinated. And she went like that, what are you talking about? She pointed to a closet, and I opened the closet, and that was where the telex machine was. And the bells were ringing wildly at that point. And so I walked through the townhouse alerting everybody at that point. That was the first time the Rockefeller people knew that there had been an assassination. So that's where I was when the assassination took place. But when Howard Hunt told me this, I really didn't know. I had not followed the Kennedy. I was not a student of the Kennedy assassination, put it that way. I knew that there were books had been written about it and so forth, but I was not a student. And so we have to go forward. I did not have any. I didn't know how to make. I didn't know what to make of what Howard Hunt had told me. Why Kennedy had been assassinated because he was about to give our most vital secret to the Soviets, and why and what this was the alien presence. I didn't know. I had no background to evaluate this, so I have knowledge of this. And so this was 1975. In about 1979, I moved to Texas. My family was down here. My parents was down in Texas. And
your parents had been in public service too. Your father?
No. He'd actually been with Shell Oil, Shell Chemical, his whole life.
Well, that's kind of public service.
He might think so, yeah. But so I moved back to Texas, and I got a job with the Secretary of State's office in Austin in the Clements administration, and then I got an offer from to go administer Moody Foundation grants, and Sherman Moody was one of the trustees of the Moody Foundation, and he asked me. He got a call from Billy Saul Estes, who was in prison, and Billy Saul Estes said, I would like a Moody Foundation grant to tell what I know about Lyndon Johnson. So Moody asked me to go up and meet with Billy Saul Estes in prison, and I did. This was in 1983, and Billy Saul said Lyndon ordered a number of murders, and I want to write a book and tell what I know. Billy Saul Estes was a notorious swindler, con man, but he was also the bagman for LBJ and silent business partner. He and LBJ were very close. And so when he got out of prison, he wanted to pursue the book, writing the book, and Moody Foundation was willing to give him a grant to do so through the Abilene Christian University up there, which would get most of the grant, but part of it would go to Billy Saul Estes. But Billy Saul Estes went before the grand jury in Robertson County in 1984 to discuss what he knew, and he discussed various killings that Lyndon Johnson had ordered. Now, according to him, there was a group of Cliff Carter, Mac Wallace, Lyndon Johnson, and who were and Billy Saul Estes, who made the decisions on who should be killed. And there were 7 people that were to be killed. Altogether, there were 11 people, but he gave me the names of 7. And one of them was he gave me was JFK. Okay, was JFK, and also one of them. By the way, here's an article from the Dallas Morning News. Billy Saul Estes links LBJ to murders. Okay, one of the murders was Lyndon Johnson's own sister. Billy Saul Estes told me in 1984 that Lyndon Johnson had murdered Joseph.
And you were dispatched to go talk to Billy Saul Estes by Sherman Moody.
By Sherman Moody.
Whose foundation was going to finance the work on and the publishing. Right. Was the book ever published?
No, it went astray. Billy Saul Estes eventually backed out, okay? After I went to a lot of work on his behalf. But I have the death certificate here. Actually, it was sent to me just recently by a friend on Facebook, and Billy Salas has told me that Joe Field was poisoned by LBJ because she was talking too much. She knew everything, and she was talking too much. She was telling people she was endangering him. Okay, and so they poisoned her in 1961 at a Christmas Eve dinner. The only other guests were John Connally and his wife. I don't think they knew that the latter two people did not know that Joe Field was being poisoned. And so the death certificate shows that she died on December 25th, and she was buried on December 26th. There was no autopsy, there was no funeral service, right into the ground. And where was she buried? At the Johnson Cemetery. But this was a number of the murders that took place. This would be a whole different program. To discuss all that, but what we want to focus on right here is the Kennedy assassination and what Billy Salas has told me. But what happened after that was the Education Forum, which is on the internet. The Education Forum out of London. John Simpkin was the founder of it. Started a topic on Douglas Caddy on the Education Forum on the JFK assassination topic because of what I had done on behalf of Billy Salas, is bringing out the information about the murders. And so I decided to join the JFK assassination topic on the Education Forum to answer questions. And by doing so, this is in 2006, I got educated about the Kennedy assassination. And what I'm saying is what Howard Hunt had told me in 1975 started to make sense based on, these were very knowledgeable people. The people on the Education Forum in the JFK assassination topic are extremely knowledgeable, highly educated. They're dedicated to ferreting out the truth about this. And so I got a great deal of information. I got an education about the Kennedy assassination and about Kennedy himself. And what I discovered was this, that when Kennedy in 1957, before he became president, and he was a senator at that time, he was on the board of overseers of Harvard University. And he became friends with Dr. Donald Menzel. Now, how this came about was Stanton Friedman, who's a researcher, went to Harvard University library to do research on Dr. Donald Menzel, who had passed away. Dr. Donald Menzel was the head of the observatory, an astronomer, world famous at Harvard. And he went there only because Menzel was the most outspoken critic of UFOs, this idea that they're aliens and so forth. He was #1 outspoken critic in the United States. And so Friedman wanted but he was going through the papers and here came a file that said JFK. He said, what is a file of JFK doing among these papers? And he opened up, and there's a letter from Dr. Menzel to JFK saying, once you've received your security clearance, there are different classifications, and Kennedy was pending a higher classification for security. I'll be able to tell you what I know about my work with the NSA, essentially about UFOs and the whole alien matter. In other words, Dr. Donald Menzel was really a double agent. Publicly, he was the biggest critic, but privately, he was one of the biggest experts on UFOs and the alien presence. And he was part of Majestic 12. And so this is how JFK became acquainted with the whole topic of UFOs. And
Majestic 12, define that term.
Majestic 12, after the crash at Roswell, the National Security Act was created by Truman in 1947. The CIA was created then, and Majestic 12 was a group of 12 individuals who created to oversee independently to oversee the investigation, the research into UFOs and alien presence on Earth. Okay, and
Menzel was
a member of that, and so he was among the most knowledgeable people about this. And so when Kennedy became president, he had his own agenda. One of his agenda was to find out more about the research project of Majestic 12, the ongoing research project. And so he knew that he would face obstacles from within the bureaucracy, from the CIA and the Defense Department and so forth. And so one of the first things he did in June of 1961, right after he was elected, was to move the oversight of the CIA's covert operations from to the Defense Department. This would give him a greater opportunity to get more information about the research projects in Majestic 12. That was an intent. That was an object of. He was very much interested in this. Okay. At the same time, he started thinking about cooperation with the Soviet Union in dealing with the alien presence on Earth. And so in 1961, he had a meeting with Khrushchev in Vienna in 1961. And at that time, he approached Khrushchev with the idea of working together on a space program and a moonshot and so forth. This is the way to build a relationship with the Soviet Union, he thought. And then he wrote a letter to Khrushchev subsequently about that. Khrushchev I think Khrushchev thought he didn't know what to make of Kennedy on this. I mean, it was kind of came out of nowhere that the president wanted to build a relationship with the Soviet Union. But from what my research has led me to believe that Kennedy felt that he was convinced there was an alien presence on Earth, and that it needed cooperation between the two major powers in dealing with this. Okay, close cooperation. What he faced in his own government was opposition. Any dealings with the Soviet Union was. General Curtis LeMay, for example, would like to nuke the Soviet Union.
Oh yeah, the Soviet stuff ran pretty deep.
Right. So what Kennedy did was he appointed Dr. Hugh Dryden, who was an assistant director of the NSA, to start working in 1962 to start working with his counterpart in the Soviet Union, another scientist, on the issue of cooperation in outer space and on moonshot. This was sort of, it was true they were going to do this, but this was really a cover story
for a mutual understanding about how to deal with internationally the presence of aliens.
Exactly. And then JFK made a speech in June 10th, which we're filming this on June 11th, June 10th, 1963, 50 years ago, at American University, which he called for peace, world peace between the Soviet Union and the United States, okay?
And that's a very famous speech.
It's one of the greatest speeches made by ever a president, and this is you can watch this on YouTube, watch it live, it's been recorded. And then he went before the United Nations in September of 1973, and he said, the exploration of outer space it's not a national issue. It requires cooperation among countries, and I want the Soviet Union and the United States to explore outer space and landing on the moon. Okay, and then he issued National Security Memorandum 271, and I think it's just going to be put up on the screen there.
Yeah.
But
it's difficult for them to read it, so
but I'll read it. This was signed by Kennedy himself on November 12th. It's directed to National Security Action Memorandum 271, directed to the administrator of NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and he says cooperation with the USSR on outer space matters. And he says, I would like you to assume personally the initiative and control responsibility within the government for the development of a program of substantive cooperation with the Soviet Union in the field of outer space, including the development of specific technical proposals. I assume that you will work with the Department of State and other agencies as appropriate. It goes on, but that gives you the flavor of it, of what Kennedy wanted done at that time. And
this would have been taken as complete anti-American heresy at the time.
It would have. It would have. And
We're in the middle of the Cold War here.
we're in the middle of the Cold War, and he's signing this memorandum 10 days before he was killed, close cooperation with the Soviet Union. And then he sent copies to the following individuals. He wanted it known that this was going to be the policy of the United States. He sent it to the chairman of NASA, to the Secretary of State. This is carbon copies to these people. Secretary of Defense, Director of the CIA, Chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, Director of the National Science Foundation, Special Assistant to the President for Science and Technology, Director of the Bureau of the Budget, Director of the U.S. Information Agency, and to Mr. Bundy, Vice President Johnson, and the National Security Files. He wanted this promulgated.
So the President of the United States is putting all of these high-ranking government officials on notice that there has been a major shift in the changing of our attitude toward the Soviet Union. When Khrushchev is over there, now is this before or after the missile crisis? This is after the missile crisis.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
This is after the missile crisis. We had a major showdown there, and now getting close to the point at which JFK is assassinated, he is opening up a whole new front.
He is opening a whole front, right.
Of dealing positively with the Soviet Union in an atmosphere where those around him think that is an absolute anathema.
Exactly. You summarized it exactly. Khrushchev had responded to his speech at American University and at the UN in 1963, which was just a few months before his assassination, affirmatively. In other words, there was a response from the Soviet Union. They were interested in doing this.
The Soviet Union, Khrushchev.
Yeah, Khrushchev.
Said, all right, you want to play, well, we'll play.
But by the time that JFK issued this memorandum, the cake was already cooked, you might say, in the oven. The conspirators had already decided that JFK had to be killed, had to be assassinated. They realized that not only was he building these bridges to the Soviet Union, not only was endangering, he was bringing about peace in the world, endangering the industrial, military, intelligence complex, which is oriented towards war.
Well, my producer is telling me that it's time to open up the calls. We have only a few more minutes left, and so if you've got a germane question, you can call in.
Well, okay, but I have to make a couple more points here. Okay,
go ahead.
Okay, so JFK, the conspiracy had already been, and it had been well planned. Okay, put it obviously, not only the conspiracy to kill him, but the cover-up conspiracy afterwards, which involved J. Edgar Hoover.
Which you'd have to do that.
And the Warren Commission and so forth. And so the memorandum that was issued 10 days before his assassination was just icing on the cake, you might say, just another reason why he has to go. What really is behind is that those who control the information about the alien presence on Earth, want to keep it to themselves. There's been hundreds of trillions of dollars have been spent on doing the research and on dealing with this subject since 1947. It's been, if you read Colonel Philip Corso's book, Colonel Philip Corso was a Pentagon official the day after Roswell. His duty from the Pentagon was to distribute information and actual products and hardware that were recovered and given to us by the alien presence, to private enterprise. And so he went around to different corporations. This is in his book. His job was, so much of what has happened
to re-engineer this stuff?
Back engineer, and so many of the discoveries, that we live with today that started 30 or 40 years ago.
Okay, Doug, let me take a brief break and take a phone call. Yes, you're on the air.
Back engineering, and so many of the discoveries.
Anybody there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
I'm on the air. I have a question for Douglas Caddy. This is John Bowen calling. I wondered what empirical information is there available on the theory of alien presence?
Okay, thank you very much for your call. Doug, you want to deal with that?
Okay, I was going to deal with this later on, but I'm glad you brought that up. I'm not holding myself out as an expert on this. I have concluded in my own mind that this is the number one issue in the world. By that I mean the Vatican has its observatory in Arizona. The Vatican has, the Pope has talked about if there are aliens, he wants to baptize them. The Prime Minister of Russia has talked about this publicly and said we cannot disclose the alien presence because it would cause panic in the...
Well, is it your theory that just under the film of what we call reality,
Right.
there lies this highly held, undiscussable secret?
Ray, it's exactly what it's all about. That's exactly what it's all about. That's exactly what about. But I would like to, in answer to the questions been posed on the phone, I'd like to say this. Those who want to pursue this further, there is information available, and actually it's in one location. It's all over. It's in different locations, but you can go to one location and see a great deal of it. You can go on YouTube to darkjournalist.com, darkjournalist.com, and on there. Daniel List is the moderator. He always does his homework when he interviews his guests, and you'll see interviews with Richard Dolan,
Well, for years, my old talk show host friend, because all of us radio talk show hosts get together and do secrets, Art Bell, has been talking about this phenomena for decades.
right, and so you'll see with Joseph Farrell and with half a dozen people who are highly educated and have done research in this area, and you can just watch and listen to them, and they'll be able to give you the information you want on this subject. It's all there on darkjournalist.com. There's one other source I would recommend, and that is Whitley Strieber on unknowncountry.com. But as you mentioned that Art Bell and Coast to Coast for years has dealt with this subject. There's been any number of prominent people who've talked about this. There have been people in the military who've talked about this at seminars in Washington and so forth. The information is out there. I think the dilemma that is covered by a Brookings Institution study years ago. What impact will it have on society if it is announced there is an alien presence on Earth, and what its purposes are and so forth? What impact will it have on the population on Earth? Right now, I would say there's probably 99.9% of the population on Earth is not prepared. They haven't even thought about this. Not prepared for there to be a disclosure of this. Okay. But a big worry right now is that with all the money that has been accumulated by the Majestic 12 and its successors in dealing with the alien presence, is it being handled properly? In other words, there's no oversight. We see a huge monetary bubble going on. You see apartments and residents in New York City going for tens of millions of dollars, which a few years not long ago would have gone much less. There's a huge amount of money floating around. My fear is that a portion of this money that should be being used for the success of the Majestic 12 study project for dealing with this is being siphoned off by fraud and embezzlement.
Well, it's, dark money, secret money is always easier to steal than public money. I mean,
Right.
if you got it laying on the table, you can see somebody reach in and grab it, then you know it's being stolen. If it's not on the table, but under the table where you can't see the hand jive, then that's easier to do. And an enormous amount of government. Enormous amount of government, state government, local government, federal government, is about converting public money into private hands of the privileged class.
Well, you remember just the day before 9/11, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld had a public press conference when he said, I cannot account for $2.1 trillion that's disappeared from the Pentagon. We can't find that money. Where has it gone? He said this publicly, and the next day was 9/11.
The next day there was intervening headlines.
But this week, Reuters,
Yeah, Reuters.
the reporting service did its
Reuters.
Reuters did a report on this, and they say since 1996, $8.5 trillion is unaccounted for in the defense budget. Now, where did the money come from? Actually, there's the black budget, which is actually appropriated by Congress, but they don't know exactly how it's spent, but they say go ahead and do what's necessary. Then there's a super black budget. The super black budget is where all the gold that was recovered from World War II, from the Japanese that they had seized and so forth, disappeared, where the drug trade, all the money spent on the drug trade, which is really to a great extent run by the CIA worldwide. The money that goes into the super black budget. There's money missing from the Federal Reserve. Craig Hewitt on Coast to Coast program about a month ago, he's a Washington analyst, a very smart man, said that he had traced $78 trillion that has disappeared from Washington, D.C., from the Treasury since 2008. So we're dealing with vast amounts of money. And I think at this point in time, we need an accounting of that. We need an accounting of that. It may have to be set up where national security measures are taken while it's being done, but nevertheless we need public accounting done that. And so the bottom line, I'm just reporting to you here today about a follow-up to my conversation with Howard Hunt at dinner, where he laid out to me these two issues, which were that JFK was to give away our most vital secret to the Soviets, which startled me. It turns out what JFK wanted to do was to bring peace. If JFK had succeeded in 1963, we would have had peace. We would have had peace 30 years. Instead, the Cold War went on.
We had 30 years.
We had Vietnam.
Yeah.
With 55,000 people killed. The war machine went on. And now what has happened? Our President Obama has reopened the Cold War again, and now there's...
Well, apparently. Apparently. I mean, we are not at war. Congress is not authorized to war, but we're going to increase the troops in Iraq tomorrow. Right. Doug, it's been a wonderful hour, but I need to talk to these folks in television camera for just a minute.
Okay.
If you found today's show interesting, if you found what Doug has brought us to report worth research, go back and watch these programs again, and at the bottom of the screen, every once in a while, they'll put out the contact information so you can see interview number 1 in this series of 2 interviews. Doug has given you some other information to research. Do that. Let me tell you, this is an enormously valuable public asset. Public access, public affairs is brought to you by Houston Media Source. Nobody tells me what to do in here. They ask me to come down and say, tell the public what you think the public needs to hear from people that you think has information that is important to deliver that message. I do that. I do that, and I have the freedom to do that because Houston Media Source is an institution that was established to give folks like me and you, ordinary folks, not special folks, access to the utilization of the media to get points across that the rest of the media is ignoring. Nobody out there is talking about this enormous conversion of public funds into private hands. No one out there is talking about the allocation of funds for things like keeping a dark secret from you so that you won't know, and what is happening to that and how that is being skimmed off to convert public money into private hands. That's going on in the law enforcement business, it's going on in the prison business, and once in a while, we have the opportunity to turn on our cameras, bring people in here that you can listen to that have the story behind the scenes. My name is Ray Hill. I've been in media since I was 7 years old. Started out trying to sound like a cowboy between country and western records. I'm the founder of radio station KPFT, whose sole purpose is to give radio access in the broadcast market to people who otherwise would not get it. to music that you otherwise would not hear. And then we come over to Houston Media Source, an institution because of the magic of television and the cooperation of cable companies. We're able to bring into your home on Channel 17 entirely original and unique broadcast material that is brought to this studio by people just like yourself. All of you, each of you, are members of communities of people, people that think alike, people that pray alike, people that do things alike, and the media is not normally conceived to be something that you have ready access to. I want to tell you, Houston Media Source is that readily available access. You have to come down here, you have to pay a few fees, you have to take some lessons so you know how to use the equipment, but we got a television channel that you can be on with your important ideas. I want to thank you for listening to Public Affairs Public Access. I'm Ray Hill, tonight's host. Doug Caddy, I treasure your friendship, and I want to thank you very much for coming in here and sharing with this audience the important information that you brought.
Well, thank you, Ray. I appreciate that very much.
And that's the final word from here. And we'll be back in a few weeks or maybe a couple, I don't know. Bill Haburn wants to come in and talk to you about some changes in the law. May bring him down. Listen up.